I'm going to be reading from Gravy. Gravy is a mixed genre collection of pieces about life after 70. It will be published by Unsolicited Press later this year. The first piece is a memoir, A Voice for My Grandmother, Later Years, Snapshots. She sits at a table by a window, her mouth with its two teeth working, her hands playing with knots in a hanky. The window is in a generic, not a specific apartment, but it's a kitchen window, her sphere. The weather too is unspecific. It could be rain, sun, snow. Too hot, she says, but that could be the steam. Can she read? Why doesn't she talk more? Probably the language. She smells of two kinds of powder, face and bubblegum. She eats corn on the cob by cutting and scraping all the kernels off, then eating them one by one. It takes a long time, but so what? She looks like an imaginary old Indian chief, referred to by my dad and me, but not by her daughter, my mom, as Ikamatubi. Or was there really some notable chieftain of that name? The shoes. Whenever she thought about the shoes, which was once every few years, her third and youngest daughter would become incensed. When mom needed a new pair of shoes, Pop wouldn't even take her into the city to buy them. He'd wrap up the old ones in newspaper and ride the train in himself, then go down to the Lower East Side and buy exactly the same shoes, same style, same color, same size. Imagine grandma being co-opted for some feminist agenda. I can think of a million things that story leaves out. Like what? Like what color were the shoes? And what did she wear while he was gone? We're probably supposed to picture her traipsing around the farm barefoot. Maybe she didn't enjoy going into the city. Maybe those were the shoes she liked. Ranu Nzuka. Ranu Nzuka, she would say as she came through the door. She would rummage through her huge patent leather pocketbook and bring out a very large packet of bubblegum, Nzuka, a segmented log, pink and speckled with sugar. One by one, I would stuff as many segments as I could into my mouth, 4, 5, and when the bubble broke, it would cover my whole face. Ranu, she would laugh, trying to look strict. I was 8 or 9 in this memory. Was that Swahili she was speaking? Was the gift made from love or from a desire for acceptance? Who can possibly say? Grandma, like my own mom, lived in loving fear. Pocketbook money keys. According to my mother, that was my first utterance. Improbable. Grandma never had a word to throw at a dog. She'd sit there smiling and nodding, and once in a while reach over and pat my hand. There was something very 60s about Granny. Like good vibes, man. Like, roll me a J, Gran. No, Ranu, Nzuka. Grandma's bones. Recently, a scandal broke. The funeral company that buried Grandma 20 years ago, a large respected old concern, was discovered to have overbooked. Gravestones had disappeared. Split-level burials were unearthed. Mausoleums had been sledgehammered to make room for multiple newcomers. Bones were found dumped in the adjacent woods. Is Grandma now in the woods? What happens to corpses matters a lot to Jews, religious ones, that is. My dad would first have waxed indignant over the scandal, and then, although he was himself non-observant, he would have made numerous self-convulsing jokes. Ranu, over here, under that big bush, Nzuka. Another grandma, the council person. Are you kidding? Cried the feisty septuagenarian grandma. You can't give out a $20 million contract without any bids, not even in this town. And if you try to railroad it through, so help me, I'll go to the papers. The taxpayers didn't elect me to let people like you rob them. A woman like my grandma in many ways, old, similar origins, even looked a bit like her. But the council person had not been married to someone who was said to have bought shoes for her. And before that, in their earlier lives, there must have been other cardinal differences. Possibly, though, somewhere inside her, Grandma had the same spirit, somewhere. Sentimental depictions of the aged. There are a few things I hate more than stories about lonely, impoverished oldsters sitting by their windows feeling bored and bereft. I don't even like these characters when they turn up in English murder novels as the neighborly snoops who peep through the curtains for 20 years until one fatal day they see something that solves the whole case. They and the writers, for that matter, should get a life. Anyway, they, the writers, need better plots. And so that's the first section. It's much longer than that. Now I switch to satire and to a piece called The Parents We Deserve. And I'll be reading just the first part. After what seemed an eternity, it finally happened. They died. Paula's mother, 87, went first, and 2 months later, her dad, 89, came tumbling after. Oh, Paul, she sniffed. Now I'm an orphan too. There, babe, he said with a smile. We all got to go sometime. And they began to talk about whether to sell the Palm Beach condo immediately or to rent it month to month while they considered their options. 3 weeks later, the magnificent property, 2 bedrooms, 3 baths, golf course view, was gone, $1.7 million, which brought their share of the total estate, one sibling after taxes, to a decent but not outrageous $673,426.50. Was it mere coincidence that their names, Paul mergers and Paula acquisitions, were so similar? Hardly. A decade earlier, and about a month into the negotiations for what they would soon be jocularly calling their non-hostile mutual takeover, the name question had popped up at an expensive restaurant. The expert waiter, having finished serving the snails and having opened the bottle of Pinot Grigio for both diners to taste and praise, glided off into the restaurant's dim recesses. The foreground music was loud and sexy, romantic. Paula and Paul, Paula said, reaching over to take Paul's hand. Looking into her eyes, he said, Paul and Paula. It was meant to be. Yep, to love, to self-love. Clinking glasses, they drank to that. For the first year or so after the demise of their second and last set of parents, the orphans sailed along swimmingly. They earned 2 salaries, 2 bonuses, 2.6. They spent, they exulted. Another year passed, passively. According to the famed French philosopher René Deschappincourt, quipped Paula, one midsummer Saturday afternoon, as they stood before the perfume counter of a fine department store, J'achète, donc je suis. Paul smiled dutifully at the forced adage, but inwardly he frowned. Sucking in 7 or 8 fragrances with one big gasp, he held them in his lungs while his mind flashed to the connubial bottom line. Yes, he had to admit it. After 11 busy years, his wife's frequent wit with her ambivalent edge was finally getting to him. Not for the first or even the second time, he knew in his heart that something was wrong with their relationship, something was missing. And as he finally exhaled, he knew exactly what that something was. Yes, it was time for the well-heeled, well-adjusted 30-something couple to have parents again. Is it possible, P? Do we really miss them? Paula asked rhetorically. The perpetual crises, the sense of entitlement, the demands, the immaturity? You know we do, Paul replied. Yes, it's irrational, but on some level, in some crazy way, all children need parents. Maybe it's just guilt. Maybe it's a need to feel superior. Whatever, it's real. So they agreed. They needed parents. And they needed them sooner, not later, since after all, the biological clock was ticking. And in not too many years, Paul and Paula would be too old for the exacting task of childing, that is, of having parents. But fortunately, as both of them also knew, it is the easiest thing in the world to buy love. Their ed, personals, in modern immaturity, that widely perused magazine for the target population, tempered a pound of bluntness with an ounce at least of tact. Elderly couple wanted for full-time live-in position as surrogate parents for financially secure, orphaned 30-something couple. Must be ambulatory, continent, able to assume position immediately. Excellent salary, benefits, comfortable accommodations, plentiful food, usual parenting duties, equal opportunity employer, no seniles please, emails only, and then it's the address. After 2 weeks, hundreds of applications, most of them unsuitable, including several pair of overt perverts, and 4 interviews negative, P&P finally found their couple. According to the terse e-app, Myron and Myrna, Fearful Symmetry, had just moved back to the city from Life is Rich, Palm Beach, Florida. This, the 5th and final interview, took place in the living room of Paul and Paula's split-level, climate-controlled penthouse condo, 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. As the tan old couple sipped their virgin G&Ts and tried not to succumb to the mixed nuts, Paul threw them an opening softball. So then, folks, tell us why you're moving back to the city. Way too many old codgers just like us down there, Myron explained, gliding his loafers back and forth on the plush white carpet as if he were skiing while sitting down. Then there's the heat, the humidity. The travel brochure sure don't mention those things. May through October, the whole state is like a giant pizza oven, and we're the pepperoni. P&P smiled politely as Myron pretended to pant and mop his brow. Myrna vigorously wagged her blue-rinsed head and flashed her Medicare quality dentures top and bottom. Pizza ovens are dry, not humid, dear, she corrected. And how about the cost of living? There's so many millionaires down there, we could hardly afford to buy our groceries and other necessities. Do you think they have senior citizen discounts? Ha! Not on your life. Ha ha, Myron said. They have junior citizen discounts. But that's enough complaining, dear. Don't mind mother, folks. She's a great kidder. Speaking of kidding, did you hear the one about the rabbi and the alligator? They hadn't, so he told it. As soon as the mutual compliments had been completed, and the door had closed softly behind the short, elderly couple, and after only a few snorts over their matching Walmart golf outfits, Paul and Paula agreed that the search was over. Aren't they cute? Paul said. Those are parents anyone could be ashamed of. Yes, exactly what we need. It was true. Myron and Myrna appeared to be the quintessential parents. Their sins seemed totally venial. Accordingly, the very next day, as per instructions, the P's white shoe lawyer drew up a contract and without hesitation, both couples inked said contract, money changed hands, and just like that, the P's had hired the M's. 2 days later, furniture to follow, the old couple moved into the spacious guest bedroom. Full bath attached, and cohabitation began. The next parts follow the couple to heaven, purgatory, and Florida. After memoir and satire, now I'll read children's fiction. This is from a story called I, Muffin, and it was written by me and my grandson, Leo Siegel. This, again, is just the first part. Chapter 1, The Wacky Muffin. An old woman sitting on a bench in front of a bagel store accidentally dropped a muffin from a black plastic bag onto the sidewalk. This neighborhood was full of cafes, restaurants, bars, banks, chain drugstores, clothing boutiques, pet daycare centers, and nail spas. But no shoemakers, dry cleaners, supermarkets, barbershops, or thrift shops. The woman, who did not look poor, stooped to pick up the muffin, barely preventing a second one from sliding from her bag. As she stooped, the fallen muffin began to speak. "Wait," it said in a gravelly voice. It was a golden brown corn muffin, big and round, with cracks on top that resembled facial features, like the man in the moon. "What are you doing? Don't you realize what's on these sidewalks? Don't you know anything about germs?" "Heavens!" exclaimed the round and pleasant-looking gray-haired woman, who was wearing glasses with plastic frames, a gray woolen coat, and shiny, new-looking orange and green running shoes. A talking muffin!" And closing the bag, she began nervously to brush off the muffin. "Who do you think you're fooling?" it asked, trying not to laugh because the brushing tickled. "You know you're not really getting the dirt off, and you don't even look poor." The old woman became angry. "Mind your own business, you nosy baked good." And she raised the muffin to her mouth. But before she could take a bite, it stopped her in her tracks. "Go ahead," it said. "Enjoy your filthy muffin." This rude remark caused the woman to drop the muffin again. Leaving it on the sidewalk, she carefully pulled the second one from the bag, took a big bite, stood up, and hurried off. But the new muffin was dry, and so, thanks to the first one's rude comment, was her mouth. So she put it back in the bag and walked on toward her apartment 2 blocks south, where she intended to toast and eat the rest of her muffin with raspberry jam, a nice cup of tea, and no more insults. My goodness, she thought, as she wove her way past big cracks in the sidewalk, people who were text messaging, and Sunday morning baby carriages and dog walkers. It's getting so a person can't even enjoy the simple pleasures. Life has become so difficult. Meanwhile, the clever muffin wasted no time. Before it could attract the attentions of any of its natural enemies, bugs, pigeons, rats, squirrels, hungry homeless humans, it folded in its legs, flipped onto an edge, and like a skillful skateboarder, using its arms for balance, rolled north along the sidewalk toward its home, the Little Muffin Room. This was a room behind the lobby of a famous old apartment house known locally as the Bakery Building. So that's the end of part 1 of I, Muffin. Now we come to adult fiction. This is a story called Dante's Way, and it describes how an actuary is fired by a big insurance company and the revenge that he devises. He's also, as a hobby, he reads Dante, and he calls his revenge a contrapasso, which is Dantean revenge, which fits the crime. So this one comes in after he's been fired. Less obvious was the contrapasso I devised. About a month after my termination, not starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, I began to set a plan in motion. I was surprised to discover how easy it would be to get even with those ingrates, my ex-employers. Not to divulge trade secrets, but I realized the firing process had been uncharacteristically sloppy. Yes, they'd made me sign some forms, a guarantee of non-disclosure of proprietary methods, abdication of the right to work for competitors with a long list of rivals plus any others, a pledge not to contact any of the firm's other employees, past or present, and so forth. As most people know, forms like these carry varying amounts of legal weight, from 0 to not if you have a clever lawyer. The only one that counted, the stricture against contact with other employees, could have been demolished in court by a summer intern. But as I already realized, if the scheme I was about to undertake misfired, I might not need not a lawyer, but an undertaker. Even more remiss, perhaps, was the company's failure to change the locks. To make a long story short, I decided to contact my 2 immediate predecessors on the chopping block. As Google informed me, both were still among the living, and for a small fee, I obtained their current home and email addresses. Both of these good folks, I hope, might well harbor simmering grudges against the firm. Via text message, I suggested we get together at a cafe equidistant from our 3 domiciles to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Vagueness was best. Let them think I wanted to start a new business or something. Neither did I add for old time's sake, which would have been patently disingenuous, since as colleagues, we had always hunkered down in the rich data of our separate projects. Within a few minutes, affirmative replies were forthcoming. The next morning at 10:30 sharp, we were ensconced at a corner table of the cafe with baked goods and beverages of choice, hot since it was February, in front of us. After minimal pleasantries, I opened the proceedings with a pre-prepared grabber. I don't know about you 2, but the company doesn't seem to have bothered to cancel my access. Their startled expressions told me I already had them on the hook. Although neither had touched their food or drink, they were practically salivating with curiosity. This is how I know. At the end of my termination interview, the PD, a new one, possibly after your time, informed me that my password would be invalidated in 1 hour. It was true. I checked. But the other day, for some reason, I decided to try an old password, which I temporarily lost 10 years ago. Apparently, they'd neglected to cancel that one, since lo and behold, it still worked. Maybe they had been careless because they assumed my big severance bonus would guarantee undying loyalty. Ha! And there's more. By now, Roger Mott, a big red-faced man who must have been approaching 70 and who obviously loved his food, was frozen open-mouthed with his fork poised in midair, a piece of baba o rum dangling precariously from a single tine. Of course, even if they had tried to take proper precautions, they would still have had security issues, things they couldn't have guarded against. It's not like when they canned us, they forced us to eat lotus blossoms to make us forget how the statistical models work. I mean, we were the ones who designed those models and the ones who wielded them all those years to make the firm filthy rich. But look at it from their point of view. What were they supposed to do? trade in good models for new inferior ones? Estelle Saperstein, the third person at the table, and my immediate predecessor on the chopping block, was a tall, thin woman in her early 70s, about my age. Estelle had been a magna cum laude with a double degree in math and physics from someplace good, Stanford, I think. As I paused for effect, she was apparently unaware that she was stirring her latte with her right index finger. Either the latte was no longer hot or she was. Still cautiously, I nattered on. Any hypothetical former employee still in possession of an active password and who knew how to work the models could either alter data in ways that severely reduced the firm's profits, or if said person preferred, partake of their assets. I suppressed an impulse to grin or to wink. But that password, Mr. Wolf objected hard-headed Estelle, must only be operative in the company's internal network. Your putative hacker would need access to the office computers. Didn't they ask you to return your keys? Or do you have old keys too? When a serious woman like Estelle makes a lame joke like that, you can tell she's in the throes of some overwhelming passion. In this case, revenge and/or greed. I knew she was on board. Call me Paul, please, Estelle. The old password works in my apartment on my personal laptop. Wow, a live B word, cried Roger Mott, flipping a piece of Baba home. I never even thought of trying mine. Why should you have, Roger, I replied. An honest, loyal fellow like yourself? And I bet you're so honest, I said to Estelle, that you never thought of trying yours either. Besides, it doesn't matter whether your passwords work, mine does. Estelle's finger had stopped stirring her latte, but it was still extended as if she were checking the wind. Oh, which caper should it be? Asked Roger, devouring the rest of his pastry in 2 huge bites. Rob 'em blind or make the business crash? He was obviously a zealot. Why does it have to be either or? Asked Estelle mildly. Oh, you took the words right out of my mouth, I said, which was true. But let's drink up before our beverages get cold. May I propose a toast? Suggested Estelle, who now wore a loopy, myopic grin. To larceny. To grand larceny, cried Roger. And to find out if they get caught, try the book. Finally, a poem. This poem is called The Old Couple Flies in a Dream to the Still Red Desert. 30 years after I wrote it, I realized that it was an analog to that painting of Marc Chagall's of a couple entwined in the air, painting that I have to confess that I hate. There's some Spanish in this that I'll tell you first so it doesn't break the flow. Gordo is fatso. Hombre Chiropteron is Batman. And más loca que una cabra means crazier than a goat. The old couple flies in a dream to the still red desert. We fell asleep holding hands that night, in bed, mind you, facing each other, side by side, my right hand atop your right. That's how it was, make no mistake. With our sleep masks on, mine red, yours black, you Liz or Lizard turned into Zora. I ran, Gordo, hombre Chiropteron, más loco que una cabra. Off we flew into the dream ethereal, stars kissing, pulling at our wind-stiff capes. Below, the soft red clay hacienda eroded brick by brick into red dust, which flew up into the twin chambers of our noses, our nostrils. 4 rooms in all. Nothing was rent or otherwise controlled. That night, the world became a still red desert.